Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the I Ching Oracle of the Cosmic Way series. And I hope you're excited today because we're going to be finishing off this series with the last two hexagrams, the hexagram 63 and 64. 63 is after completion, 64 is before completion. So these are literally the bookend to the entire I Ching. Indeed, hexagrams 1, 2, and 63 and 64 are, can, you know, there's this math you can do with the I Ching where all the hexagrams actually reduce to one of these four hexagrams. So in a way, these four hexagrams, 1, 2, 63, and 64 are, represent the I Ching as a whole. So what does after completion mean? What are we completing here besides this series? But anyways, let's get to it. After completion is water over fire, the judgment. After completion, success in small matters, perseverance furthers. At the beginning, good fortune. At the end, disorder. Exactly what is it that makes success endure? The sage addresses this question in the theme of this hexagram, which concerns that which makes the success achieved through one's efforts endure. This is what defines the cosmic meaning of completion. As in hexagram 64, the word completion refers to the final completion of the steps of an undertaking that has cosmic approval through transformation. A person's efforts to bring to completion, and indeed the I Ching, it is properly called the book of transformation. A person's efforts to bring to completion any goal require the helper of transformation. The person may engage in consistent efforts, be guided by the sage, correct his attitudes, and say the necessary inner no's. Thus, he puts in his 100% effort. At this point, he must turn the matter over to the helper of transformation and leave it to the cosmos. Then the helper of transformation, together with other helpers of the invisible world, makes the necessary changes on the primary level of consciousness, transforming the situation. No great achievement can attain enduring success in any other way. Completing also means fulfilling one's true uniqueness through freeing and bringing to maturation the true self with the aid of the sage and the helpers. Success in small matters can be read in two ways: that one has reached a small or partial success in regard to one's undertaking, or two, that enduring success is to be attained through consistently ridding oneself of the small seed phrases and images that comprise the ego and prevent the personality from achieving its full potential. This hexagram can be saying that while certain seed phrases and images have been removed and a transformation has occurred, other seed phrases or images are still present, which threaten to undermine the success achieved. An example is having said the inner no to a parent who has encroached into one's affairs. But because the person has been trained to feel guilty for saying no to a parent, the guilt enters to undo the no and undermine its beneficial effects. The person needs to rid himself of the poison arrow of guilt he has accepted. If you don't accept it, it can't affect you. A person may also receive this hexagram when, after making some outer changes, he has achieved balance among conflicting forces. However, because he has not dealt with the cause of the conflict, all he has achieved is a teetering situation, like that of being on a tightrope, which requires constant attention and effort to keep the various contradictory forces balanced. In the end, such a situation can only end in exhaustion and failure, which is the meaning of, at the end, disorder. An example is the person who uses meditation only to calm himself. But as soon as he leaves this state of rest, he is quickly agitated again because the worries he displaced return. The true purpose of meditation is not a temporary escape, but to seek out the causes of the imbalance, which are false phrases in one's inner program, and rid oneself of them. Only then does the peace become enduring. In regard to balancing opposing forces, cosmic forces do not oppose each other. Cosmic forces do not oppose each other. The cosmos maintains harmony through the attraction that exists between complementary forces. The idea of opposing forces originates in the demonic sphere of consciousness and needs itself to be deprogrammed. After completion can also concern a person who has achieved success in the form of great wealth, fame, or top position. Or he may have externally engineered his life in such a way that he now feels secure. However, the security is based on a false self-confidence and pride. At the end, this order points to the fate he has created through having achieved his success without the aid of the helpers. His failure is pictured in the image of the fox that, having nearly crossed over the ice at the last minute, falls in and gets its tail wet. Here, the tail represents the small detail of the helpers, which he has left out of his calculations. It also indicates the considerations of things unseen that he has left behind, but which follow him, like the tail. The hexagram also warns the person who has achieved great progress due to his sincerity against allowing the ego within him to appropriate the success by saying, I did it, I have made it, or other such thoughts of self-congratulation. Such phrases need to be treated as spells. Other spells connected with this hexagram have the words always or never in them, which prevent transformations. An example is a spell put on a person that asserts he will never change, that he will always make that mistake, or implies that he is such and such a person by nature, implying always that way. Poison arrows that reflect hopelessness or helplessness also block transformations. Line 1, he breaks his wheels. He gets his tail in the water, no blame. The metaphor, he breaks his wheels, can refer to the person's bringing his progress to a halt through indulgence in wanting, wondering, and worrying, at the base of which is doubt. He may be wondering, for example, why, after having put in his effort to achieve his goal, success still remains aloof. He may be asking himself whether, in following the sage, he has been deluding himself. He needs to understand that the goal can only be brought to completion by his turning the matter over to the helper of transformation and letting go of it entirely. He needs also to say the inner no to any attempts of the ego to supervise the completion. There will be no blame if, at this point, he corrects his attitude by saying the inner no to his doubts and acts as counsel. Other meanings of getting his tail in the water mentioned in the main text include trying to reach completion without the helpers and forgetting to take into account unseen factors that follow him, like the tail. Line 2, the woman loses the curtain of her carriage. Do not run after it. On the 7th day, you will get back what you have lost. Wilhelm comments, when a woman drove out in her carriage, she had a curtain that hid her from the glances of the curious. It was regarded as a breach of propriety to drive on if this curtain was lost. In this line, the metaphor is used to indicate a loss of the protection and help given by the sage when a person has put his trust in the wrong kinds of protection, such as force, arms, power, symbols, etc. Riding in a carriage in this line speaks of a person who is riding above the ground, out of contact with his common sense. This causes him to lose his connection with reality and to put his trust in his fantasies. Without his common sense, he loses the protection it gives him against being deceived by others. The carriage can also symbolize a wrong way of making progress. Here, the progress has bypassed the help of the sage and the helpers through the person's acting from a vain self-image. Consequently, he's lost the cosmic help and protection he needs and thus invites encroachment. This reveals the cosmic principle that the person who is free of a self-image does not invite encroachment. If he will rid himself of his self-image and return to humility, he will again draw the protection and help of the sage. This line also makes us aware of the cosmic principle that the things we need are free to come to us only when we have detached from wanting them. In running after what is lost, we only lose our self-esteem. Nothing worthwhile can be retrieved or attained this way. To truly understand this principle, we need to be aware that everything in the cosmos has consciousness and responds to consciousness. Consciousness that is in harmony with the cosmos, i.e., that comes from one's dignity, invites the harmonious response of the cosmos, whereas acting from any ego-driven desire causes the helpers to retreat. The reference to 7 days states the cosmic principle that what truly belongs to a person, his dignity and self-respect, can be recovered within a relatively short time if he corrects his attitude. The word loss has cosmic meaning only when we speak of losing self-esteem, self-worth, clarity, and cosmic protection, help, and nourishment. These inner losses, which are the only real losses, can be retrieved by correcting one's attitude. This line can also refer to guilt that undermines what a person has achieved in cooperation with the cosmos. He had attained that cooperation through deprogramming his mistaken beliefs. Now that the problem has been resolved, he returns to his beliefs through feeling guilty for having abandoned them. A related problem occurs when partners who have separated fail to close their interconnection with the help of the helpers. Guilt for having broken vows or promises will keep them bound together in a way that is destructive to both. Very interesting right there. The carriage can also symbolize reliance on hopes to keep going. All hoping is a response to underlying fears or doubts, the fear of not getting what one needs, and the doubt that one's efforts will lead to happiness. Such fears and doubts cannot be resolved by hoping, which is pure fantasizing. Fears and doubts come from the ego and need to be addressed by identifying the seed phrases and images that give rise to them. Then they need to be deprogrammed. Once these ego emotions have been addressed and they no longer influence the heart, help comes from the sage and the helpers to help us fulfill the true longing of the heart for love. Line 3. The illustrious ancestor attacks the devil's country. After 3 years, he conquers it. Inferior people must not be employed. In its cosmic meaning, this line refers to the persistence over a period of time that is necessary for persons to succeed in deconstructing the ego in himself. This process must proceed phrase by phrase and image by image, as these are brought into consciousness in relation to his everyday circumstances. It is not possible to attack the ego as an entity in itself, for it is a complete program of phrases and images that has installing features, protecting features, upgrading features, and reinstalling features. Its deconstruction is carried out with the aid of the helpers. The persistence must be such that it wears the ego out. The person who believes that it is enough merely to shrink it, or that he is capable by himself to contain it or keep it small, falls under the teasing phrases put forward by the ego itself. This is why the line warns against employing inferior people. After 3 years, he conquers it, refers to this persistent effort. 3 years does not refer to an actual time, but is saying that the ego can indeed be conquered, and that it is not indomitable, as it tries to make us believe. The term illustrious ancestor refers to the deepest sincerity in making this effort. In the meaning given by the collective ego, the illustrious ancestor is the collective ego itself, which has appointed itself as the correct authority to fight evil in the world. The collective ego defines the devil's country as anything connected with animal nature. On this basis, it claims that if a person follows his true nature, he will undermine the social order. Such a claim distracts the individual from seeing how the collective ego, through its conditioning activities, undermines the natural order of society and the harmonious way in which human nature operates in society, when not conditioned by the machinations of the collective ego. Indeed, the inferior people mentioned are these mistaken ideas and beliefs, and the devil's country is the true name for the demonic sphere of consciousness created by the collective ego. This line can refer to a person who, in following the path of freeing his true self, suddenly sees himself as undermining the social order created by the collective ego, and therefore feels guilty. He is unaware that he is reacting to a guilt spell put on him during childhood that is keeping him under the collective ego's control. He needs to free himself from that guilt spell and to recognize that it is the collective ego that undermines the natural order of society. Yet another example of how the collective ego reverses cause and effect. A person can also receive this line when he desires to discipline or discredit another by bringing the matter between them into the open. Doing so, however, is to employ inferior people. By causing the other to lose face, he only hardens the ego in him. Such an attempt comes from the ego in himself, which acts from self-righteousness. Bringing the matter into the open only destroys his first intention to have good effect. Responding to another's incorrect behavior through saying the inner no achieves the correct effect without defaming the other's character and without reacting from the ego in yourself. Inferior people can also be a reference to what a person falsely considers to be inferior in himself and is therefore trying to discipline. For example, he may be trying to rid himself of his animal nature by disciplining his body through ascetic practices, such as excessive time spent in meditation, setting in contorted positions, or abstaining from giving sexual expression to love. In reality, the inferior people are the poison arrows he has put on his animal nature, which need to be removed because they prevent the renewal of his life force. Line 4, the finest clothes turn to rags. Be careful all day long. The finest clothes mentioned is a metaphor for a person's having become free or one or more self-images. His success, however, will turn again to rags if he indulges in any self-congratulation, as in thinking he is superior. Be careful all day long is counsel for the person to keep aware of his inner thoughts and on guard against any new self-image that may tempt him. A person can also receive this line when it appears that he is about to succeed in his undertaking. The line counsels him, however, that he has not rid himself of one or more seed phrases that, if left in place, will undermine his success. The phrase may be, I did it, an attempt by the ego to claim credit for what was achieved by the helpers. He needs to say the inner no to that idea. Otherwise, the success will turn to rags, meaning its good effects will dissipate. This line may also call attention to the person who, after achieving success, cannot shake off his doubt that transformation makes it truly endure. Such a person may believe that ups are followed by downs as being the way of life, rags to riches, riches to rags. If he persists in projecting this belief, indeed, his fine clothes will turn to rags. This line can also refer to the person who thinks he has followed the I Ching's counsel, but it is now apparent that he was not successful. The cause is that his sincerity was half-hearted, so that he has glossed over the remaining issues standing in the way of success. Such a person may have a variety of false phrases in his program, such as, whatever you do, it is not enough, behind which is, the cosmos only puts up obstacles for us. No one is ever going to appreciate what you do, looking to others for approval. And nobody is perfect, implying that putting 100% effort into the task is impossible. These kinds of phrases cause a person to approach his life half-heartedly. This line can also warn a person of another who appears to have corrected himself, but who is not yet trustworthy. He therefore needs to remain cautious and reserved until the other has truly corrected himself. He may also need to ask the sage for protection from that person's wrong intentions. This line can also refer to the person who, upon undertaking a study with the I Ching, believes the task consists in developing his higher self. Oh my God, how much have I heard that one? You don't have a higher self because nothing is higher or lower in the whole cosmos. Nothing. If something's higher than you, that's implying you're lower than it. So you're devaluing yourself, creating a false separation between you and those helping aspects that you regard as higher. This idea creates many misunderstandings in his readings of the text and creates a barrier between him and the sage, because this idea is based on a division of his wholeness into a higher and a lower self. The image of the finest clothes can also be a metaphor for a magnificent attitude by which a person magnanimously plays God by taking it upon himself to forgive, admonish, or condemn others. He thereby condemns another by telling him, you have really failed this time. Or he lets another off the hook of his fate by telling him that what he has done is okay, or that he forgives him. Such ideas come from the human-centered view of the universe that has put man in the role of representing God or heaven on earth. Paradoxically, this view can cause a person to allow others to run roughshod over him. Such pretensions of possessing power come only from the ego and bring about the fate referred to above as rags. The person can end his fate if he will rid himself of this magnificent self-image and the seed phrases that have created it, and if he regrets his arrogance. Line 5, the neighbor in the east who slaughters an ox does not attain as much real happiness as the neighbor in the west with his small offering. This line has to do with the seed, phrases, and images that underlie the magnificent attitude mentioned in line 4. Such an attitude is based on seeing humans as charged by heaven or by God with the duty to condemn or forgive others. This idea is also used to authorize persons, groups, or institutions to have rights over other species and things. In the cosmic system of harmony, a person has only the duty to forgive himself for his mistakes once he perceives and corrects them, and the duty to say the inner no to all aspects of the ego in himself or in others with whom he is involved. The ox, traditionally an animal of sacrifice, is mentioned here as a metaphor for a person's having sacrificed his animal nature, believing it will placate the higher powers. While proud of his sacrifice, he also envies others who go about their lives simply and are happy. He therefore thinks the cosmos or life is unjust. Receiving this line can be to make him aware that he has acted on the mistaken idea that he has a higher and a lower nature. Mistaken idea, higher and lower nature, mistaken idea, which ideas created a fate. I mean, you're fully free to believe in that idea, but eventually the cosmos is going to wake you up to its mistaken nature with a fate. Freeing himself from it and from the self-image of the spiritual person will free him from his fate and bring happiness back into his life. Getting rid of such ideas that slander his wholeness is the small offering referred to. This line also addresses the idea of sacrifice in general, whether it be to gods, higher beings, or sacrifices made to ideas or institutions. Sacrifices are made to placate a higher power or to induce it to be benevolent. They are plainly attempts to make a deal with this higher power, and therefore are foreign to the cosmic way. Bargaining is the way of the collective ego, and there is no higher power with which to negotiate. There is no higher power with which to negotiate. You are it. Humans can reunite with the cosmic harmony through the simple act of perceiving and correcting their mistaken ideas. That's what's truly revolutionary about this. It's all about the mistaken ideas. It's all in our head. We're living in a matrix of the mind. Line 6, he gets his head in the water, danger. He gets his head in the water refers to a person who has begun to look back with longing and regret after having crossed the great water and separated from the human-centered vision of the world. For example, a person who has freed his true self has now adopted the idea that he has left his friends and fellows behind. He now thinks he must haul them across. He is unaware that dissolving his bond with his group, the group we, as we talked about in Hexagram 59, dissolution, is the only way to dissolve his adherence to the values of the collective ego and the individual egos around him. It does not mean abandoning the other's true selves or those with whom he is inwardly connected. The sage resides in everyone's presence and is available to help if asked. However, the idea that it is one's duty to haul others across comes from the human-centered belief that humans have to do it all. This view obliterates the existence of the sage and the helpers. Do you see how that view, the idea, the mere idea that you have to do it all, back of the mind thought, just what you've been taught, what you've been conditioned to, is actively harming you. It's actively harming you because it's blocking you off from the sage and the helpers, because that idea obliterates their existence from your reality. Danger refers to the fate that is created by such an exaggerated self-importance. The line also applies to the person who has been blessed by the cosmos, but allows the ego to suggest that his life is now lacking excitement. The ego is thus slandering harmony as being too tame and giving one nothing to strive for. Listening to these voices of the ego creates a fate, the danger mentioned. The same danger is also created by self-satisfaction. The truth is that life in harmony with the cosmos is far more inspiring, full of wonders, than the treadmill drudgery of living within the parallel reality. Danger can also refer to someone who believes he has conquered the ego in himself once and for all. While it is possible to conquer the ego, the ego is the first to suggest that it can be conquered through means other than deconstructing it, as mentioned throughout this volume, deprogramming the ego program. The person who boasts that he has conquered his ego has lost touch with his common sense and is under the control of the ego. Wow, what an irony for you right there. See how tricky the ego can be? Well, that's it for Hexagram 63, guys. After completion, what makes success truly endure? It's, in a way, remembering the helpers and the sage, remembering the invisible world, so that we create, and being in accord with our true feelings, so that we create transformations that have duration, which truly endure. All right, guys, that's it for this one. Don't forget to like and subscribe right there, and I'll see you again in the next one.